Sawyer, I have a very important question for you. Were you secretly a writer on Once Upon a Time and just never told us? What's up, Yap Squad? My name is Brooke, and I am here with my co-host Sawyer, and we are Yap Sesh, a fangirl podcast where we discuss all things fandom and nerdy and hope to share the experiences of women and queer fans everywhere. Please find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or our YouTube channel, and make sure to subscribe. I'm keeping it in to subscribe and follow us, and hit that bell. I hate saying that, so you never miss an episode. What's up, Sawyer? How's it going?
Well, it's been a couple weeks since we've done
Yeah,
one of these.
it has been a little while. That's why I got tripped up on my words there.
Yeah. But I'm excited to be back and, had a lot of exams and stuff, so took a little time off, went to New York Comic-Con.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. Which was really cool. We got to see a bunch of our friends and go to a couple parties, and everybody got to see Brooke's amazing Keyleth cosplay, which is even better in person than it is on video.
Aw,
So,
shucks. Thanks. It was labor of love, so I'm glad that people like it. And my hair's red now.
It
if you're watching on
is!
the YouTube channel. I did that yesterday, so
It looks so good. I love it.
thanks. It's a little streaky if you look at up close, but it's fine. It's fine. It was just a little test to see if I like the red, because I did this myself. Maybe I'll go to my stylist next time and be like, "Hey, I did this and I liked it. Can you make it permanent?" We'll see. Who knows? Who's to say? But yeah, Comic-Con was great. Excited to go back next year. I already bought tickets for Critical Role's live show. That is the same week next year. So I'm going. Heads up for everybody a year in advance. But yeah, I'm really excited for today's episode. Because we have a really fun topic and a really cool guest. And I think without further ado, let's bring them in.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hazel.
And thank you for the invite again. It's a pleasure already.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be talking about fan fiction. And but before we start, if you could introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do, what your content you make, and then we are fangirls in this house. So we always ask if you have a first fandom you remember being a part of, and what your favorite fandom is that you are a part of.
Yeah. So again, my name is Hazel. I am a full-time worker with the county. I work at the courthouse, and I would call myself a part-time fan and part-time student. Actually, I'm also back in school part-time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for stenography. So hoping to figure out like how to make a career out of that.
Cool.
And in terms of my content, I just started TikTok, I think, because for a similar reason, I wanted a place to just yap. And that's exactly
You're in the right place here.
Exactly. And that's kind of what my TikTok has become. It started out with cosplay, a little bit of Red Dead Redemption. And what started my videos, though, really, I guess, getting more attention were fan fiction videos, talking about fandom etiquette, fan fiction. And yeah, that's mostly what I do.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And can you remember like what your first fandom was?
Yes. Oh, my first fandom must have been, I want to say Teen Titans.
Okay.
Nice.
I was a huge Teen Titans fan back then. Still am, actually. And my current favorite fandom, it's a broader fandom. It's called Danmei, or Chinese Boys Love. I started getting into that sometime around last year and earlier this year. And there are so many books and TV shows regarding the genre that's where I've kind of been hanging out.
Cool. I love that. That Teen Titans, that's a throwback. It's one of those shows that I remember loving and watching over and over and over again. And then you go back and look and you're like, there was only 2 seasons of the show. Like there was not a lot of episodes.
I didn't
No.
realize that. I only
Yeah.
watched. I unfortunately I only watched Teen Titans Go because my younger sibling was young
Mhm.
enough when that
Mm.
show was coming out, and they really loved it, and so
Right.
I would watch that with them. But I never touched. I think I wasn't on the Cartoon Network as a kid, so I didn't watch Teen Titans when everybody else was watching it. But I've heard good things. I didn't realize it was only 2 seasons though.
I think it's more 5-ish, but it went from the typical 20-episode series to I think it got cut down to 10 episodes, so it feels much
Yeah.
shorter. Like, yeah, as
Yeah.
I went back to it, I said, "Oh, I've watched all these episodes, and it felt like a long time back in the day, but you can finish it in maybe less than a week."
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of episodes. Love it though. I love that show. So we are talking about fan fiction today, all things fanfic. We've got a lot of different avenues we can go down. But I wanted to start with a little icebreaker. What was the last fan fiction that you read, and when?
This morning, I'm pulling up my phone. It
If you
was
feel comfortable sharing what
oh,
it is.
I am more than comfortable sharing it. It was this morning. Um, it's for a oh, that's sad. The fan fiction is called Damaged. It's not. Oh, there's a bit of dead dove content in this. It's Omegaverse.
Nice.
Checking all the boxes right now.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just gonna disclaimer, like, to all of our
Yes.
listeners, this is a judgment-free zone, okay? So if you're here to judge us on our fanfiction opinions, you can see yourself right the fuck out.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. I am very much to maybe jump a little further in the don't like, don't read. If you don't like this, you can exit out. You can skip
Mhm.
ahead if you don't
Mhm.
if you don't like what I'm saying. I'm going through the tags. I'm like, oh, it's about an alpha in order to keep another alpha forces him to become his omega. There's also time travel shenanigans somehow of this
Oh
happening,
my
and I'm
gosh.
I'm like more than halfway through it. I think I was reading it last night, and the minute I woke up, I continued reading it.
If it's a good fanfic, I love doing that. That's the best.
Oh, same. I'm actually still figuring out if I like it. I like it, but I'm not sure if as much, but I need to know how it ends. So,
Sometimes, yeah, I'm a completionist that way. I'm like, I'm kind of over this, but I need to at least get to wherever it was last updated.
I don't know
right.
if if it's a bad fan fiction. I don't know. There's only so far that I can go into it. It depends. If it's bad, well, we can get into this later. But
Yeah.
like, we're yapping away already. But Hazel, you make a lot of content about fan fiction etiquette and fandom etiquette, and so we were so excited to bring you on to talk about this today. But I would love to get started on first of all just talking a little bit about the history of fan fiction, or starting at the beginning with what is fan fiction, because there's always the chance that someone listening to this is not acquainted with it, and I think that there's definitely I know that there's some overlap in my community of people who are not fan fiction readers and maybe don't
Mhm.
understand exactly what fan fiction is and it what it brings to fandom. So
Right.
I know that you've given talks about this before. So if you would want to introduce like what fan fiction is and the history of it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, by definition, fan fiction is written works written by fans, typically amateur fans, about an already existing IP. And in terms of the origin, it's still very debated. And I think the answer is based on who pissed you off most, because some would argue that the first fan fiction is Dante's Inferno, since it is someone taking the Bible and writing it as some guy's like hellscape, essentially, since hell is always mentioned in the Bible. For more modern fandom, or the way that we see fandom now, a lot of fanfic origins come from, I think, I would like to say the Star Trek fandom is mostly credited for that. Starting out with both slash shipping, self insert, just fan fiction that maybe explores an episode. That is when I think fan fiction really made it more into a community space. And typically too, fan fiction is not for profit. I think that also makes a huge difference between and it's fan works by fans for fans.
Yes. Yeah. I will say, like, we can talk about later how there has been published fanfic, but it is, it's not published in the same sense of it's the same thing that you read on AO3 just published into a book. Because there's
Right.
also weird things about people that are printing fanfic and binding them and selling them when it's not even things they wrote. Weird.
Mm.
But we'll talk about that stuff a little later, I guess.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask too,
Mhm.
there are many different places in which one can read fan fiction, and I think it's evolved over time. So do either of you remember the first fanfic you read, or at least where you read it on?
Oh yeah. Oh, I was a Wattpad girl. I never did the fanfiction.net. I a little bit, I guess, but I was very much, I don't know. I think Wattpad was having like a boom when I was of the age where fanfiction became appealing, and it coincided with my time as like starting Instagram roleplay. So, I think Wattpad was having some kind of like, I don't know if it was new or it was just having some like advertising success, but that was like the first website that I found that was like, this is for fan fiction, and that's where I started publishing fan fiction as well. Oh my god, are we going to talk about that today?
It's kind of on the outline.
That is true. I did write stuff about writing fan fiction. Hazel, do you remember where you found fan fiction the first time?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this shows our age difference. Because mine was it like it had to have been between LiveJournal, fanfiction.net,
Mm.
DeviantArt, and just random forums I would find.
I
Yeah,
forgot about DeviantArt having like fan fiction, because sometimes people would post art and there would be like an entire fic under it.
Yes, yes. I was one of those people who would not even post art because I'm not the best artist. I think I would take random Google images, use MS Paint
Yeah.
cover page, and the body of the text of that DeviantArt page is actually the fan fiction. That's what I did.
Yeah, I feel like even now I read a lot of my fan fiction on Tumblr.
Oh, yes.
But I do remember, and I don't think it was like when I was young enough to not really recognize that I was on like a fan fiction website, but I'm pretty sure it was like fanfic.net. I feel like there was even random pockets of fanfic on MySpace, also dating myself here. And there's like random. I remember there was a lot of like people, you remember when people, I don't know if you know, but I loved playing The Sims growing up. People would make these like elaborate, they would replicate music videos of like famous music videos or whatever on YouTube, and then replicate it in The Sims and then put it on
Yes.
YouTube. And there was some overlap between those and MySpace, and then people writing like stories about said music videos. It's like a vague memory I have from like being in middle school, because MySpace was my first social media that I used.
Oh, see, that is only fascinating to me because I was not allowed to use MySpace growing up, funny enough. Yeah, I was banned from MySpace. Fanfiction.net was fair game, apparently, because it was a bunch of
That's fair.
text.
I think, you know what?
pictures, so-
I got a
wow.
MySpace, and then my parents found out and they were like, you can't have this thing. And I was like, okay. And I had it. And then they were like, fine, whatever. So yeah, but no, I definitely read things on like fanfiction.net and also just like random forums.
Yes.
Like, I couldn't even remember what the name, because I would just like search things on Google and then I would just click on, probably not very safe. This is not good internet safety etiquette, kids. But that's what I remember doing.
Yeah, and I will say that while I know we're going to talk about AO3 in a bit, I'll admit I love the forums that were just dedicated to certain fanfics, certain pairings, to certain fandoms. I just thought that was cool of everyone making like their own personalized website just to share their stories. And it did, of course, make it a bit harder to search for what you're looking for. But once I found a forum or an author who had their own site, I said, "Oh, I found it. I found what I wanted."
Yeah, definitely more personalized in that way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like how I got to a point though in which I was aware that fan fiction was a thing. Like I don't remember any time. I remember conversations about like My Immortal and things like that, but I feel like those were after I was already like I can't remember what introduced me to the concept of fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was shipping, and I think it had to have been shipping.
It's usually shipping.
Mhm.
That I'm pretty sure that's why I was reading fan fiction too. It was to ship characters, and of course, then we found out, oh, there's fan fiction not related to shipping. But shipping, has to be the main reason for like how we find a lot of fan fiction now, or when you first find fan fiction.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember too, and I feel there's not like a clear time where I was like, ah, yes, I am searching for a fan fiction and I'm reading a fan fiction, because I definitely was reading and searching for what I now know is fan fiction way before that. I think I also, and this, it's funny how like things that you have when you're younger or enjoy when you're younger kind of carries with you, because I'm a bit, and we'll talk about all the different types of fanfic. I love self-insert fics. I love a good ex-reader, and I in like 8th grade, I think I was obsessed with the the first Chronicles of Narnia movie, and I definitely was reading like self-insert Narnia fan fiction at that time. I don't think I knew that it was fan fiction, but I was just kind of like Googling like me, but in Narnia, whatever, and I would just find random stuff.
And just to add on a bit, I think I have a very specific memory of me actually searching for the word fan fiction, and I also want to keep in. I didn't say I was in the 4th grade when I first started reading fan fiction.
Oh.
I did not have my internet access. Surprisingly, was pretty open, despite the fact I was not allowed to have any social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was after clicking a few stories, I saw the word fan fiction, and once it popped up enough, I said, "I think this is what I'm reading." So my search was like in ship fan fiction, character fan fiction, fandom fan fiction. So I, for that young of an age, I was already aware of like, this is what fan fiction was.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think that I ventured for, like I said, it totally coincided with me developing like Instagram roleplay for my Frozen fandom, and like I think that I would I would have been 13, so it wasn't until although I will say, and we don't really like to talk about Harry Potter on the show, but it comes up. It just does, because unfortunately it's so heavily part of the queer millennial / like early Gen Z experience was to be involved in Harry Potter. And there, when I was a kid, we did this really intense, like we would have this group of kids read all the books, pick out all the spells, and give everybody their own spell book. So we had every single spell to play out this story on the playground. That was like a continuation of like basically it was like the Cursed Child. Like we ended up predicting a lot of things that happen in I never read the Cursed Child, but like for what I've heard is in that book or play or whatever, like and we would do that. We would like write the story and then we would go act it out on the playground at school. So I think that technically that was my first that was fan fiction. I didn't realize, but yeah.
No, that is 100% fan fiction, and I love it. Like that's it. It's so cool that even though Harry Potter, I have my own gripes, even unrelated to J.K. Rowling and about it, but to be able to just have that kind of creativity, I think is why I love fan fiction, and like what a fandom can bring out is the creativity within its fans. You don't have to just read it at face value and just be done with it. You can do more with it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like I teach preschool, so even like the kids on the playground will be like, there was a couple kids I had a couple years ago that, was it a couple years ago now? Geez. Whenever the first Young Jedi Adventures came out, so I guess it was like 2022 or early 2023. I had a couple kids that were like, loved it. They were both like, I'm Yoda, and they were just doing like little role play of them being Star Wars, and that's the same kind of like collaborative storytelling that we do when now as adults, if you're writing a fan fiction or if you're playing a tabletop game or D&D, like it's all connected. It's great.
It is.
What was I gonna say? I asked words are hard today. We talked about like remembering our first experience with fan fiction. I was never a huge writer of fan fiction, but I wanted to know, do you remember writing fan fiction for the first time
Oh,
and
yeah.
what that experience is like? Or do you still write fan fiction now?
Mhm. Oh yeah, I immediately remember writing my first fan fiction, which was again Teen Titans. It was in my fourth grade class because I didn't want to write the actual essay, so I think it was a Robin and Starfire fanfic too. And I don't remember what they did, but I remember writing pages and pages of that in my class and keeping it for myself, just because I didn't want to do the writing assignment. But the first fanfic I posted was a Pokemon fan fiction, and that was I think I was playing Pokemon Emerald when that first came out, and I created my own self-insert. Like if I was the Pokemon trainer going on the adventure with like both protagonists of Pokemon Emerald, and posting that the first time, unedited. It was grammatically all incorrect. I remember comments of people saying, "Please check your grammar." And I said no because I already don't like doing that for my English class. Why would I do that for fan fiction? Not even thinking though of the current etiquette of like a lot of fan fiction is again amateur, unedited writing. But as a teenager back in the day, I just didn't care. And to this day, yeah, I'm still writing fan fiction. I think I haven't written in about a year, but I already have an idea for one, and I'm just going to see if I have the energy to do it. Because admittedly,
That's
that's
real.
yeah.
Yeah, I have in the past written fan fiction. I did it a lot as a kid. I had a lot like that energy. Like I had a lot of it
Yes.
when I was a teenager. I had so many ideas and so many things that I wanted to play out. But I also, you know, I, you know, how much of this do I have to disclose on this podcast?
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
Listen, this is not live. We can cut it out later if you decide.
Yes.
That's true. It is also my podcast, so I can say what I want.
Yeah.
No, so I recall I had a very strong writing phase in that like time in my life where I was first like in the Frozen fandom, and then it was Wicked, and then it was the like my preferred apocalyptic world of choice was Divergent, but you know, it was at the time where it was like the Hunger Games and Divergent and Maze Runner and like all of those things, and like I was really heavy on the Divergent stuff. So there were two like prolific fan fictions that I wrote. One was a co-write that I wrote with my best friend at the time, and it was called Frozen in Oz. And the whole idea, it was like we were having our Frozen/Wicked phase because there's quite a lot of overlap in story and also who plays those characters. So we said, okay, Anna has braids. What if Oz and Arendelle are in the same world and Anna gets lost in Oz and she's actually Dorothy?
Oh, that's cool. No, I love that train of thought. That is exactly the train of thought I want to see in fandom and in fan fiction. That's awesome.
The problem with this fan fiction, though,
Oh no.
is that everybody had to have a love interest. Everybody. So Elsa was partnered up with Flynn Rider from Tangled.
Ooh.
Anna has an affair with the Tin Man when
Yes.
she's supposed to be engaged to Kristoff. Or I guess not engaged at that point. I guess they're just together because it was Frozen 1. And then I think we stuck with Elphaba and Fiyero from the Wicked novel, which is not for children. Not that children listen to this.
I hope not.
Please don't read that book if you're under the age of 18. But and then I don't think Kristoff, I think he just gets his heart broken. I don't remember what everybody else was, but yeah, it was like a whole thing, and there was like lots of pregnancy and lots of like suicidal ideation.
Sawyer, I have a very important question for you. Were you secretly a writer on Once Upon a Time and just never told us? Because
Oh.
that's basically the plot of Once Upon a Time.
No, but that was at the time that Hannah was obsessed with that show.
Uh-huh.
Which makes a lot of sense now that you're saying that.
Listen, Once Upon a Time, if you ever want to know what, like, if you turned a fan fiction into a television series would look like, that feels like a fever dream, it's Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
The only season that
100%.
I watched was the Frozen season, and I remember being very confused and very like, this is not how it's supposed to go. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was that, and then there was my Divergent fan fiction that was very, very popular on Wattpad. Anyway, that's a crazy story about my experience with fan fiction, and if you would like to hear it, you can subscribe to our Patreon for our
Ooh.
unedited episodes.
Cliffhanger.
But after that, I wrote some Doctor Who fan fiction for a little bit. I will say I've never been able to write like OC fan fiction or like self-insert or like I just want to play in the world. Like it's always been ship fan fiction for me.
Mhm.
I will say I did start writing a fan fiction for Oshamir, but
Yes.
Nice.
I had this idea. I had this idea to do a 7-chapter fiction that's like one chapter for each deadly sin. So it would be a very spicy fan fiction if I did it.
Mhm.
It's so see perhaps it'll see the light of day. Maybe one day.
That's the thing. It's like I have a lot of ideas and a lot of fics that I've started that I've never posted anywhere. Like I definitely, and this is me again. I'm big like self-insert or OC character because I find it easier to write an insert character than it is to write or like capture the voice and personality of another character that's like already established. I'm not the best writer, but like that's something that I definitely like when I'm writing, I have to like go back so many times to like read through it and try to like talk it out in my brain or talk it out like in real life. I'm like, is this something that this character would say? So if I like focus it more on like a self-insert or an OC character, it's like, okay, this is like my voice, so I can write her however I want. So I definitely have a lot of, I'm sure there are old journals back in the basement of my dad's house that have like just fics that I started writing, probably not even realizing that's what it was fan fiction. But I've enjoyed, since I've started playing Dungeons and Dragons and other TTRPGs, I do really enjoy writing stories about my characters and like the characters in my D&D party. Because again, it's like it's my voice, but then it's also my friends who I know very well. And if I write something that they wouldn't say, I can show them and they'll be like, actually, I would say it like this. My D&D group, we are starting a new campaign. So we're kind of wrapping up all of our stories from our old characters. We didn't get to like fully finish our campaign that we were doing, but that's a story for another time, or Patreon if you want to know. But we have like done a lot of writing and doing like a couple one shots to like fill out where are the stories of our characters, where they're going or where they are going to end up. So this last part that we're doing, we said, fuck it, let's just make our characters level 20 and see all the crazy shit that we can do. But my D&D character is getting married to our friend Chris's D&D character. So we're having a wedding as like a one shot where we do this like big battle. But there's a lot of stuff in between that we didn't get to like role play out in a game. So we're writing fanfic about it. And I'm very excited because I think it's like going to be a nice solid piece of fan fiction that I actually finish.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Because I start so many things and then don't finish them. But that's also, I think, my problem with when I get really hyper fixated on something, that's when I really want to write fan fiction. But if I take too long to write it and then I move on to something else, then that fan fiction is just like lost to the ether and I never finish it. I started like an Uncharted fan fiction. I still love Uncharted, but I played like all 5 Uncharted games in like a month and got really
Yes.
into it. And I was like, I'm gonna write a fan fiction because it's like an Indiana Jones adventure.
Yeah.
And then I started playing Baldur's Gate.
Oh,
Oh.
so
Totally lost me. Yep.
understandable.
Yep.
I'm a huge Uncharted fan as well.
Oh, cool.
I don't have my Nathan Drake necklace. I next time.
I
But
have
then
my it's on the shelf over here, but I have my Uncharted 3 Nathan Drake little statue, and I have my Uncharted 4 art book, and then I bought Sam Drake, love of my life.
yeah.
Also because he's played by Troy Baker, who also plays Joel Miller. Everybody drink because I'm talking about The Last of Us. Anyway, I bought someone makes replicas of his lighter on
Oh,
Etsy. I spent way
yeah.
too much money for it because it shipped from like Norway or something. Don't care. Because it's like a real Zippo. It's like a working lighter.
Yeah.
But that's on my shelf too.
I'm gonna ask for the link for that later. During the non-recording session, I said I'm trying to be better about spending on fandom merch, but you said lighter Uncharted. I need it.
Yeah. I love it. I actually use it all the time for candles and other
Mhm.
things that you have to light. That sounded really ominous. I don't smoke, but if I did, I could use it on that.
We really like candles here.
Yeah, birthday candles. I don't know. I do use it. It does get used. So yeah, I'll send you that link.
Thank you.
All right. What's
Anyway.
next? This is how these episodes always go.
This is
we
how
just
you know
go
it's a
on.
good episode too.
That is true.
Yeah.
Like if we don't get to everything on the outline, it's probably a pretty good episode. Because if you like get to the end of the outline and you're like, what do we have to talk about next? It's like,
Right.
it's not as good as an episode. Okay. I'm just reading through now I guess we can talk about the different types of fan fiction and like
Okay.
what are our preferences and
Oh, are we gonna
all of
talk
that.
about our tags?
Ooh. I would like to start off by saying that one of my favorite tags on AO3 is hashtag the helmet stays on.
Checks out.
Yes.
Yep. I don't know if this is a tag or if it's something that I made up myself, but it should be a tag. Is hashtag convenient handlebars as well. I don't read just smut, but those are two of my favorite funny things.
I'm just trying to think of like the fandoms that you're in. Handlebars. What is that in context to?
So
Horns, like
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I think
Okay.
it started out when I love Daredevil. I love Daredevil, and his mask has like two little devil horns. But then I was thinking about, I was like, Batman also has like two little things on his.
Yeah.
And so then anytime it's a character, now it's kind of like a bit where I'm like, haha, like convenient handlebars. And people know, like I have my friends know that, so then they'll be like, convenient handlebars. And I'm like, ha, it's so funny. But yeah, that's cool.
I like that.
And Darth Maul.
Oh.
Convenient handlebars. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he can.
What are you guys?
I'm trying to think too if I have a favorite tag. The funny ones I think of are like character did nothing wrong, character deserves a hug, or if it has that one especially.
I love that
Especially
one.
if it has to do with a character, talking about maybe a character's past or trauma is character's dad is A+ parenting, and that is a super sarcastic tag. They were not a good parent at all. Yeah, and I say all those tags when majority of what I read is smut, and I'm not ashamed to say that, but I'm like, I do a lot of smut with feelings, apparently.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm the same way, I think, in terms of like what I read for the most part. I love a good like Ben Solo is blank blank blank. Like there's a lot of really funny ones. There's a couple of fan fictions that I find really perplexing, and I know this is because Leia or because Carrie Fisher was Jewish, but there is a tag that is kind of popular on AO3 that's like Ben Solo is Jewish and I will die on this hill.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But
and
I don't know if I feel like sharing my real tag.
I do love a good hurt comfort tag. You know, I
Yes.
like a good angsty fic, but it has to end with like some sort of like comfort or like happy. It doesn't have to be a happy ending, but there's got to be a little bit of. And this is my preference on all stories, not just fan fiction. Is I love a good angsty story where there's like trauma and drama, but like it has to end on like some sort of hopeful note. I say,
Right.
as The Last of Us is one of my favorite franchises, and there's no happiness in those stories whatsoever. But I will say that like they both, well, it ends. Part 2 ends kind of in a hopeful note. That is up to, I guess, viewer interpretation, but I see it as a hopeful ending.
I'm sorry, this is gonna be a side tangent. When I finished The Last of Us 2 for the first time, I think I had to like sit down for 20 minutes
Yeah,
just because I
yeah.
was like, I was so conflicted. And then I became Abby's biggest defender, and then I started
Oh,
crying.
yes.
And then like I just that game tore me apart. And I tried to replay it on New Game Plus, if there was a New
Mhm.
Game Plus, and
Yeah.
I think I have to wait a little bit longer. I said that was just too emotional for me. I have to go. I have to be in
It's
a
tough.
good spot.
If I'm in the mood to replay it, I often skip a lot of the cutscenes. Like I'll just pause, skip cinematic.
Yeah.
But they did release with the remaster this like no return mode, because I really like the
Yes.
combat in. A lot of people might disagree with me, but I love how like realistic the combat feels. Like when you're
Yeah.
sprinting, like you can't just sprint, for miles without slowing down. Like they get tired, your character get tired. Your character like loses their balance on stuff. But I love that. So the no return gives me that little like fix if I'm into playing that kind of combat. But I just started a new playthrough of part 2, which it took me like 6 months to finish the last playthrough. But I am also a big Abby Anderson defender. No spoilers for the story if anyone is here listening, doesn't know anything about The Last of Us or is watching the show. But it's really funny to me that I have friends that came over every single week to watch each episode of the show with me, and I just can't wait for like the first episode of season 2, and my friends are going to be so confused why I love Abby so much. And I'm like, you just gotta keep watching. You just gotta keep going. I'm looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward to the rest of it because that's a lot.
It's a lot. On topic though, I decided to look at my tags because I'm unashamed. My bookmarks are. I have my rule is if you find my AO3, that's your fault, because like there is no For You page. If you find my AO3, if you find my bookmarks, that's your fault. You were searching. Like you did not have to search that far.
I mean, that's a very good thing, I think, in any fan fiction. If you found this and you read it and you had a problem with it, that's your fault for reading it.
Yeah, like it's very easy to press the back button, exit out of it, just space out, which is what I unfortunately have to do when I'm reading. Sometimes when I realize, oh, I'm too tired to read, I'm spacing out. I'm not actually reading anymore. If you stayed until the end, that's on you. But the first. Surprisingly, my top tag is alternate universe, modern setting, or just alternate universe.
Wow.
I tend to do a lot of fantasy sci-fi settings, and I apparently really like them in our modern boring setting for some reason.
That's interesting. I am not a huge AU person. I do love a lot, like we mentioned a little bit, how there are published fanfics. Like I love all of Ali Hazelwood's books, how they're very like it is an AU, or it started as an AU and then was, all the names were reworked and then it was published as a real book. But I like those, but most of the time I don't love reading AUs. I think it's because I'm like, I want the escapism of being in this like fantasy world.
Yeah.
That's exactly what my friend said too when he was surprised that I liked modern universes. He's like, why? Like, don't you want to leave this place? I said, that's fair. I completely see that.
Yeah.
I like a good AU. I there are some AUs, like there are some tropes that I'm like, this isn't for me. But I like to explore different scenarios with like I think not every ship does that work for. Like, I can't see myself if it's a very well, like Oceanmere, for instance, like that is such a passionate ship to me that I can't see putting them in like a modern setting. But
Right.
there's something about Raylo. I think Raylo is great for AUs because they are, well, frankly, because we didn't really get enough of them in the material that we were given. So because of that, I feel like it's so easy to put them in whatever scenario I want to put them in.
Right.
Yeah.
That is true. That kind of brings me to a question of fix, I guess you can call them, is if you're listening and you don't know what a fix fic is, it is often either a piece of media that gets canceled before the story can finish, so people will write the endings themselves, or people don't like how something ended, i.e. the Rise of Skywalker. A lot of people do like fix for Kylo and Rey, or Ben and Rey. And I'm trying to think of other circumstances, but like that's the kind of idea, is like, we didn't get to see this full story fleshed out, or I didn't like how this ended, so I'm going to write a fix fic, which is obviously it's not canon because it's a fan fiction, but it is, I think, a lot of people's like therapy in a way to like make themselves feel better about how something might have upset them, like a show getting canceled or a show not ending how they wanted it to end.
So you want to go first, or?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I don't think I read as many fix because I see all of fan fiction as like the extension of what I want in the original source material. Not actually, extension is the wrong word, but an alternative if I wanted more from the original canon. So even with shows that have gone canceled unexpectedly, I'm not sure if I'm reading what is sometimes a fandom's perceived next season, or if I'm just reading the fan fiction because I said, oh, the show got canceled, but here's a bunch of fan works that is related to the show, so this is what's going to fill that void. That being said, I was in a fandom called the Prodigal Son fandom, or Prodigal Son. Oh,
I missed that show. I was so bummed it got canceled.
Oh my gosh, it was
I love it. I loved it.
It was such a great show. A group of us actually, I ended up dropping out because I just could not make the time for it, wrote season 3. It was a project amongst fanfic writers, and it was all scripted out. It wasn't just fanfics. I'll try to find it again.
Cool. Yeah, send it to me if you can.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that show. It's so good.
Right. It was great. It was, in case you didn't know, Sawyer, it was about an FBI consultant whose dad is a serial killer, and so he's helping the police solve murders based on the trauma and knowing and the psychology of why his dad was doing all these murders.
Interesting.
And it was with Tom Payne. Right, it was Tom Payne.
Yes.
Okay, I was like, yes. I hope I didn't have his name wrong.
My homie Jesus. My homie Jesus from The Walking Dead. And Michael Sheen was the dad.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And he was so good. That was such a good cast too.
It was a really strong cast.
Yeah. Which is, it's funny, I watched Prodigal Son first, and then I went back and I watched The Walking Dead. Because I watched all of The Walking Dead for the first time like a year and a half ago, or I guess the beginning of 2023. I was in my zombie era, and I didn't realize, like, when I got to it, he looks so different in Prodigal Son than he does, because he's got really long hair and a beard in The Walking Dead. And I was like, it took me a minute. I was like, oh my God,
it's him.
Yeah, it was great.
And I felt bad too. He left The Walking Dead to do Prodigal Son, which like he loved it too. So for them to just, and I hated that they canceled the show that we found out the same time the actors found out.
Yes,
we thought we would have. Yeah, it wasn't fair to them. And they worked so hard on that show, and working through COVID too in order to get season 2 out. But I digress. There was a group of my friends had written, I say us, but I dropped the project because I just did not have time for it, who wrote their own season 3. I love that they wrote, like, let's conclude this story since it ended on a cliffhanger. And that's just what a fandom can do.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. That's really powerful of a fandom. And I think, like, I guess fix don't bother me really in any case, even if, someone didn't like how something ended, but I did. If they want to write their own version of things, like, that's totally cool. I just don't have to read it. But there are, and then there's things like, I'm just thinking of how most people hated the ending of Game of Thrones, but I haven't personally searched a lot of like fix for how people want it to end, but I also think that's because George R. R. Martin hasn't finished writing the series, and so people are just waiting to see his version of the ending. But yeah, I guess there are times where rewriting a finale is like not a thing. But
I've definitely used it as therapy before, and it's helped. Like I need to be like, I've used fix as like, I'm in denial and I need somebody who is equally as delusional as myself to like tell me that it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And that's totally valid.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Oceanmere is still growing as like a ship and a tag, and so like that was not available to me when the Acolyte was canceled because there's only so much. But you know,
I mean, at least Lucasfilm Publishing is good on that front of giving us more content.
That's true.
From the Acolyte, just not maybe in the way that we wanted it, but it's okay.
I'm hoping for crumbs. I will take every crumb available, and I'm gonna work with it somehow with the Acolyte. But
yeah, my hope now is like people, and I don't think if the Acolyte, we can talk about this for hours. I don't think the Acolyte was canceled because people hated it. But it does remind me of like Hayden and Ewan when the prequels came out. All they heard from people was like how terrible it was, and then time went by and the kids that loved it were old enough to tell them how much they loved it and tell the internet how much they loved it, and then we got the Obi-Wan series because of it, and we got Hayden back in Star Wars. So I'm like, maybe down the line there's going to be people that are like, no, I actually really loved, I mean, there are people today that say, no, I actually really loved this thing, bring it back. But you just got to live a little breathing room, and then hopefully Lucasfilm will be like, you know what, let's do something with this. Okay, so we've talked a lot about all of our preferences on fan fictions and things and whatever. I'd like to talk a little bit now about I don't know what you would call it, like fan fiction etiquette. There's a lot of like, let's be real, there's a lot of like morality police people out there in the world. And I think we all kind of have the same stance on this from not even just talking to you today, Hazel, for the first time, but also just what I've heard from Sawyer about that whole realm of things, because there are sections of the internet of people that are very
passionate
about people not writing about certain things, or the whole, we talked a lot about this when we did our shipping episode about like pro shipping and being an anti, and like the whole conversation around all of those things. And it's like, what is okay to write about? What's not okay to write about? Are we protecting our children? Or like, are you writing? And what if a minor comes across this fan fiction? I'm like, oh, this fan fiction that is like appropriately tagged as like NSFW or minors do not interact, and a minor is reading it. I don't control it. Anyway, that whole realm of things, I thought we could talk a little bit about, because
I was going to ask, how long is this podcast recording supposed to be? Because I can go on for hours, so I'll condense it as much as possible. Like, like so many topics. To start off, though, the fan fiction golden rule that needs to be brought back, and it has been brought back, but more people need to remember it, is don't like, don't read. If you do not like it, do not read it. And that can be from, you read the summary and you don't like it, don't read it. You get through the first paragraph and it's not your thing, don't stop reading it. You get through 3/4 of the way and you still hate it. If you want to be a completionist, sure, or you can stop reading it. And at the end of the day, if it's not for you, you do not have to consume it whatsoever, because something I try to say when it comes to fan fiction is that it's not an extension of the canon, it's an alternative, because it's not canon, meaning that you do not have to read it if you don't want to. You don't have to, just because it's popular or just because it's there. It's not something that you have to read. And that's what just confuses me, that some people who really want to police what a fan fiction should be, I ask, like, why do you care so much about what some stranger on the internet is writing? because if you don't like it, no one had forced you to sit down and to read it. You can write your own fan fiction, actually. If you really don't like it, then do something yourself. Or if you hate the idea of fan fiction at all, stop opening AO3. Like, there's so many ways to prevent yourself from getting angry over some fan's interpretation of a canon work. And I hate to say that, I do think it got lost. Not to sound like that old person blaming TikTok, but I'm gonna blame TikTok for this. When fandom, I think, started culminating into one social media, and at least that's what it kind of feels like. People who maybe are just being introduced to fandom, or maybe were casual people in fandom, are starting to get way more introduced into other fandom cultures that they would have deemed as cringy, and actually still do deem as cringy. I still remember when I went to conventions, but my friends told me don't cosplay because that was cringy. But now cosplay, we can see, has gotten much more recognition. And that was the same with fan fiction. A lot of people, and even now in fandom, would say like, oh, I don't read fan fiction. I don't want to read someone's interpretation of a canon, which is completely fair. And some people ended up treating fan fiction as if you had to read it to understand the canon. It's like, actually, you don't. I don't know why that came up, unless it was, I think, for people who felt behind in fandom, or they felt like they weren't able to relate to the fandom because maybe the fandom is talking about a popular fanfic, so they decide to read it and then they just don't get it. But because of that their own misunderstanding of fan fiction, then there comes this time to police fan fiction, like people who get upset that people are writing non-canon ships of fan fiction. Like, yes, that's kind of the point. That's how a lot of people got into fan fiction, was by non-canon shipping. They wrote a fix-it ending because they didn't like the ending, and then they got upset. Or someone wrote a fix-it story, but it didn't go through the way they wanted it to go through, so that must have been a horrible story. They wrote these characters with a darker theme, and how dare you, because darker themes are bad. But and I'm still trying to wrap my head around of why at some point you need to just stop caring, because if you're gonna care that much about, again, the random internet stranger writing a fan fiction that you don't want, I don't know what else you worry about in your day-to-day. Like, that person's fan fiction does not have to occupy your mind if you really don't like it. And I say this as someone who has read bad fan fiction, or I've read fan fiction that's considered the popular one of the fandom, and I thought it was mid as hell. But I'm not going to go blame that author or blame the fans. I'm just not going to interact with that. And maybe that does come with some growth and maturity, especially if, like I said, I came into fandom way too young of an age. So I think that's why I learned the rules and the unspoken etiquette early. But I'm seeing people in their 20s who have never touched a fandom before getting in and acting like the way I did when I was a teenager. I'm like, oh, how dare you write those two characters kissing? He belongs with her instead, you know? And plus, I hate to say, negative ship wars, negativity, gain more popularity on TikTok. So to see people say, when everyone likes that horrible that popular fanfic you hate, and people start naming the fanfics and the authors to get people to send like threats to them, it's like, no, that's not okay. But it got 1 million views, so
yeah,
exactly
and that's why, like, I feel like we've talked a lot about the fan fictions that we like and or not like or whatever here, but I still find it hard if I were to be like, oh, here's a list of all of my favorite fan fictions and who they were written by, like, because that's something that is not for necessarily me to share. Like, I can, when I read it, I'll give kudos or I'll comment, be like, wow, this was amazing, but it's also not my story. It's like the people that like print out fan fictions and then bind them with a cover and then sell them, and it's like, you didn't even write this shit, and the person that wrote it posted it for free. But like, because I've seen other like YouTube channels or podcasts that will like openly make fun of fan fiction and like read it as like entertainment and make fun of it. And I'm like, this is someone's work that they did for free. Like, they didn't do it for a profit. They did it out of their own passion for this thing. I'm sorry that it doesn't match up with what you want it to be, but that's not an acceptable, like, that's not cool to me. That's just, you're just making fun of somebody for writing something that they want to write. And
Oh, exactly. And
yeah.
and the ones who do that too, for them claiming sorry, I have someone in mind, but uh for when I see people do that, and especially if they are in a fandom, that's when I know immediately that they are in fandom, but they are in no way a creative person in fandom. Like that means I usually they are not a fanfic writer, they're not a fan artist, they're not even like a thirst trap editor. They don't make content like we do when we're just discussing things. They are in fandom but use all negative aspects of fandom for their own viewership, but they don't try to create anything else except drama. And yeah, that just completely irks me, especially that I don't know nowadays, but at least back then, whoever's writing the fan fiction, you don't know who they are, you don't know their age, you don't know their backstory. And so to make fun of someone's writings, like you don't know if you're making fun of a teenager who is writing fan fiction for the first time or an adult who's just trying to share a little bit of escapism. And hey, I even said it, like a lot of fan fiction is unedited. Maybe there is some grammatical spelling errors in that, but if you really don't like this fan fiction, why did you stay on the page? Why did you keep going?
Yeah. It's also like, with any art, the artist incorporates their own personal perspective into things, and I think that a lot of there's a severe lack of empathy in these circles of people who are, I think it may be because it's fan fiction and they're like, the author is borrowing from a universe that already exists, and so maybe that somehow makes it easier to detach the work from the artist itself. But when you're doing that, you are attacking the artist, and you're probably,
Yeah.
If we're talking about dead dove content, which for anyone listening, that means, like difficult topics, like sexual assault and whatnot. If they're incorporating that into that fiction, there's a very high chance they're doing it because that's their own personal experience, or they're trying to heal from something. And who are you to take that away from somebody? If you don't want to engage with that, like you said, Hazel, stop reading.
On the stop reading, I just realized, because I got a few comments on this, some people would get mad. They're like, well, I'm already reading the page. Of course I'm going to keep going. I'm like, okay, don't like stop reading then. Maybe we need to add the stop function to this sentence, because I personally just can't understand that continuation, especially of something that you can physically stop doing. Like your thumb isn't scrolling on purpose, or I don't know, maybe it's because I glaze over things I read all the time. So it's like sometimes I'm not also reading, and I think, okay, it's time to literally stop, put the phone down, exit out. And that's not to say that what you are reading can't affect you either, because that is something I do understand, that maybe you did start reading something and, oh, this was definitely not for me, and I didn't mean to, I didn't think this would affect me this way, but it is still partly your responsibility to stop reading it then. Like if this is affecting you, again, it's a fan fiction, you can step away from it and take that time for yourself to recover from what you read. But if you said that this is the most traumatizing fanfic that basically hurt me, and then you read all 100,000 words, but you're not saying that as a compliment, you're saying it as a, this is why the author should die. Like, I don't understand like how there couldn't have been a stopping point for you when you can stop reading it.
And I think that there's like a high proportion of people who just don't read tags. Something that is so great about AO3 is the tags and how accessible they are and how easy it is to filter them. Like if the fan fiction says dead dove do not eat, don't read it. That's not a joke. They're not using that tag to be funny. They're saying, hey, there's going to be some very disturbing imagery in my fiction, and if you don't want to read it, I'm protecting you by saying do not eat, which means do not read.
Right. Oh, I hate to say though, I found out that there was I wanted to say it was a small community, but the community actually has a big fandom who was using dead dove incorrectly. And I think that started to why the discourse happened. Their definition of dead dove wasn't like, again, a dark topic such as sexual assault, murder. It was character hurts other characters' feelings. character.
Oh God.
They really watered down the term.
Mhm.
So then those fans were shocked when they were reading a different Dead Dove fic and they were actually triggering topics and they were confused. They're like, what, like, why is this? And the author would say, I tagged it as Dead Dove along with the other tags. Like, why,
Mhm.
like, why are you upset? Right? Because that's not what Dead Dove is for. And that's when everyone was like,
Ooh.
actually, we're putting a huge pause on this because
Mhm.
you guys were actually the ones using Dead Dove incorrectly, not that author. And so when I found that out, that there was a good community of people who was taking the tag to water it down, I was just confused. And I wanted to say like maybe they were just younger writers,
Mhm.
but yeah, that had happened for a bit. So the fact that the Dead Dove debate, yeah, still kind of goes on, even though I feel like most people universally know it means like proceed with caution.
Mhm.
And if this is upsetting, stop reading. And others were using it as like a lesser version of that, and then getting shocked that people use it to the fullest extent.
Yeah, and like there are people out there that think that those works should not be written or published at all. Like, why are you writing about XYZ, these dark topics? And you could say, sure, like if someone wants to explore, because it is a way that a lot of people heal from their own personal traumas. And sure, you could say, okay, we'll write it, but don't publish it. But then that is not like that doesn't normalize it to the other people who might be experiencing or have experienced those same traumas. And I think the beautiful thing about fan fiction is that you can cultivate a very supportive community. And it's, if that's not your thing, then just don't read it, And it's like, I don't know. I remember beginning ish time of COVID, there was a very popular Kylo Ren fan fiction that a lot of people liked and a lot of people read. And then it came out somewhere else that the same author wrote another fan fiction that had these like heavy, dead topics. And everyone was like, oh, cancel this author because they're writing about this. And it's like, I kind of almost got swept up in it. Like, oh, why am I reading? And then I'm like, you know what? It's not for me. It's for it's for the author and maybe whoever else might identify with those as a way of being kind of therapeutic. So who am I to say? I think I've always been kind of like, do what you want. I don't, if I don't like it or I don't want to, I'll just not interact, but the older I get, the more I get that way. I'm like, just mind your own fucking business, bro. Like, I always say with like my ships too, it's like, take it up with God. Because I see a lot of people who will be like, oh, I'm open to all fan fiction or all ships except for, and they'll name like XYZ of things. And it's like, for example, like a lot of people are very anti-incest because that is not a thing in real life that you should participate in, right? But then there's Game of Thrones, where there's a lot of incest, and because it's a big fandom, there are people that are going to write fan fiction about those topics. And when I see people in the comments like, why are you writing about incest? I'm like, it's canon in the fucking show, in the books. Like, don't interact with it if that's not that's not your jam, And it's like that, and it's ugh.
And that conversation always astounds me because it's been brought up like, okay, why is it okay for George R.R. Martin to write the incest, but random user whose name I'm now going to use, Astarion Ass Eater 69, because that's a character I use. How come it's not okay if they write that fan fiction? And there's always the argument of like, because the author knows what they're doing, you as a dumb fan does not. And I'm like, no, that's not also how it works. Is that your own self-projection on yourself as a fan or the fandom to what you see? Because I think there have been a lot of fans who have been able to write fan fiction or almost meta fan fiction that are as equal to the original author. There are also a lot of stupid authors out there who their original canon work, I'm like, no, I don't trust this author either. So like, who's for you to say that one person is going to be smarter about it than another person just because one has a publishing deal and the other one does this for fun? Like that's not what it is. But so whenever I bring up Game of Thrones, unfortunately people they quickly use that argument. I said, well, here's something to throw back at you because that's still not how it works here.
Yeah,
but it's still annoying.
I see a lot of that, like, especially with people that are on like Tumblr. They have like a card and they're like, oh, I ship, I'm cool with all ships except for incest, and it's like, you're not gonna believe this.
Yeah.
But it's like I always do like an asterisk, like only in the Song of Ice and Fire universe, because it's normalized in that like bubble. I'm not
Right.
going to read that same topic in a universe that is set, in a modern era, like
Right.
our world. You know what I mean? But we're also all fucking people with brains, and we can 99% of us, I'd like to think, can differentiate between the fiction and the reality. And the whole point of fiction is that you can engage in a healthy way in these topics and things that you might be dealing with, or your traumas or whatever, and you're not doing it in real life, like
Yeah.
if someone is writing a fan fiction about a serial killer, like I'm gonna say a fictional one, if you're writing fan fiction about a real serial killer, there are some I was gonna ask next, like, are there any things that like really make you uncomfortable despite us being like, nah, everything's cool? But if that person turns out to actually be a serial killer, like that's like the outlier of the situation. It's like, see, look, they were writing about this stuff and now they're in jail for killing. And I'm like, okay, but there are 99% of the other people that are doing the same thing and have never even hurt somebody in real life ever. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
And
everyone wants to point out that like the minority that creates the panic.
Oh, exactly. And like even to that, I would still argue like, okay, they did that, but again, at the end of the day, it's their real actions against real people that I'm going to count over than what they have done fictionally. Like they wrote fan fiction about a character murdering another character, whatever. They hurt a real person. I don't care about their fan fiction. I care about the fact that they hurt someone in real life. Think about the family. Think about the people actually involved in that. That should have way more weight than what happened in that fictional universe or the fiction that they wrote, because we are out of the realm of fiction at this point.
I also find it strange, and maybe this is just because I am a woman and I am not. I don't know what the male experience is like. But is it not true that certain tags on certain websites are more popular than other tags?
Yes. 100%.
Why are we not directing that same energy over there towards that demographic of people? No, I mean, you don't have to be a man to watch porn. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just like, why is it? Because fan fiction is a femme-dominated space, right? So why, like, I'm just saying, why are we having these conversations and not, looking outward at this other demographic of people where those exact same things are happening in very different ways?
And I hate that the answer is still always going to be misogyny, because how dare a little girl has fun or an adult woman have fun doing something completely harmless, but then a man does it and it's like, oh, but because he's smarter than you, he knows what he's looking at. You dumb woman with a college degree don't know anything. So like, and I hate how constantly infantilized, especially women and femme-presenting people are in terms of these kind of topics and spaces. Like even outside of the fan fiction realm, the romance book genre is a genre on TikTok I hate looking at, because 90% of them have really horrible takes and the 10% actually have recommendations. But the 90% with the dumb takes are like, women cannot read because she is too dumb to understand this is fiction. And it's like, why do you think that? Why do you genuinely believe that she cannot understand that this is a fictional romance book, like one of the second largest genre next to mystery genre, at least back in 2017. I haven't looked at the stats recently, but I just can't fathom why they can't make that connection, or why they haven't changed their mind on that maybe this is just something for fun, and the answer is just misogyny. But anyway.
Well, there's the big conversation on TikTok, on Book Talk, that I'm like not on, but it shows up on my For You page once in a while, is like, oh, people that don't want to read anything unless it has smut in it. And it's like, okay, cool, do what you want, And then a little tangent, something else that bothers me on Book Talk, coming from a fanfic girly, is like someone will recommend a book and they'll be like, oh my god, it's so spicy, and then it's like the spice is half a page in a 300-page novel, and I'm like, And it's the most vanilla spice I've ever read, and I'm like, have you spent a day on AO3?
Right.
You know, I'm like, I'm
Right.
not trusting Book Talk with their spicy recommendations anymore.
And I hate to say it, that has to be a result of the publishing industry. That is my only guess, is because AO3 with their stance on like you can post whatever you want here within there is some exceptions obviously, but this isn't fanfiction.net where there was a purge of smut fics. This is you can have that. The publishing industry, I think, still has a weird line that they teeter, despite the fact that erotica is a genre, that the books are actually categorized by spice levels. So vanilla is like they held hands and kissed at the end of the book, and then spice, the spiciest that's not erotica, is like full on scenes. Even the full on scenes, I just don't think are as descriptive, and I don't know if that's the industry like not ready for that kind of very explicit storytelling, or at least the trad publishing industry. Indie publishing romance, like they go all out.
Oh yeah.
Because they can go all out. But trad publishing, I don't know if they ever felt brave enough to go that far, which I think is a huge shame because they could, but like
there's a market for it. Like look at all
Yeah.
the users on AO3 or any other fan fiction site,
And
you know, like
it's kind of disappointing because I think things like that lead to conversations about fan fiction being mediocre or not being like the quality of a published novel or
Right.
something like that, which in that I know that's not the case at all. I've read, you know, there are fan fictions that are better than published books by far.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
you
yeah.
know how many published authors that are like very well known that still write their own fan fiction?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many.
So yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, it's I think moral of the story, is if you don't like it, don't fucking read it. Get
Just
out of here. Press backspace, you know, like whatever. I will say, like, I was gonna ask, like, are there any like hard lines for you that you're like, I don't like this? What, like, one of my really only thing that makes me kind of uncomfy, which I think the reason why it does is because how social media has grown and how almost every single person, including like famous people, have social media, is when people write fan fiction about real people. That I don't engage with it. I don't like it. Like I am all about my Mandalorian fanfics, my Joel Miller fics, but as soon as I see like, Pedro Pascal X Reader, I'm like, that's a little bit too personal for me. But I think back about like I was adjacent to Bandom, but a lot of people would write like self-insert or OCs.
I got adopted by One Direction.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was so much more acceptable, like, even just 10 years ago, because it was more like there was a better chance that that person was never gonna find out that you wrote a fan fiction about.
Well,
them.
nowadays you have journalists
And I was gonna say,
asking celebrities about fan fictions and fan edits and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that is the reason why I am uncomfortable with it, is because that is something that should never go back to the actor or the whoever it is, but it does now, because it does. I'm like, that's not something that I'm like want to engage with.
Right. And on that, because personally, RPF or real person fiction, as like you were describing, doesn't bother me, unless it's about like real life killers or children. That's obviously a hard no, at least for me. But I agree. It's because now that a lot of journalists wanting to connect the subject or the actor with the fan base, they're taking the most things that are meant to stay in a fandom, and fan fiction is 100% that. Fan fiction and shipping culture is meant for the fandom, not for the subjects of that. So for them to bring it to light, I definitely understand why a lot of people are uncomfortable with RPF, because now the chances of that actor seeing it are 10 times higher than it was 10 years ago. And
I mean, you have actors saying they go and they look because, it's hard. I would imagine it's difficult to not have that urge to Google yourself. And nowadays you Google yourself and you find this like, oh, what's AO3? I've never heard of this. Or you have actors like Amanda Stenberg, who is a lifelong fangirl. And knew from the get-go, like, oh, I'm gonna be in Star Wars, there's going to be stories, like there's gonna be fan fiction, there's gonna be fan art, and has gone on their Instagram and been like, oh, I've seen it, I've seen
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And on the one hand, I trust the actors who I think have that history of fandom culture, because I would like to believe they know the boundaries as well. They're going to expect the weird stuff and try to keep it to and try to maybe keep it as PG as possible just for the general audience. Or maybe if there is stuff that they're looking up, it's just going to be for their own private time. I know that Mads Mikkelsen for Hannibal, I think he openly talks about reading Hannibal and Will Fix. Like he loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah, he talked about how much he actually loved the fan fiction behind it. Same with like the Our Flag Meets Death cast, but for celebrities who don't even really want an online presence, or the online presence is their manager posting on their Instagram stories, of course they're not going to know this. They're not going to understand the fandom behind it, and they shouldn't be subjected to it, especially if they weren't seeking it out in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's like I guess the autonomy of the person that the content is written about. Like if they are the ones to talk about it or bring it up, it's like, cool, okay, now I know that we can go there. But if it's, a journalist asking Pedro Pascal for the 10th time if he knows that he's the internet's daddy, I'm just like, please find something else to talk about, because he's clearly like been over this for he was over it the second, third time that someone brought it up, and like it's a lot of the sorry, but it's a lot of journalists that kind of ruin it for the rest of us, because like you said, it should stay within the fans. And now, because of this whole like doing things for clout or doing things for clicks, like it's just the world that we live in now, I guess.
Yeah.
Not to sound like a boomer, but
listen, we can blame something on social media. It's a fact.
Yep. I mean, this conversation has been great. We talked a little bit about published fan fiction, like people that have written fan fiction that has then become a published work. And if you read the original fan fiction, you're like, cool, I'm so excited for this author to like publish this. I remember reading it when it was just a fanfic. But then there's like people that don't realize things are fan fiction, or even like AUs of another established like franchise, and it's everything's just reworked so it doesn't infringe on any IP. I just think it's really cool. Like I think it was brought to light, especially with all of these Reylo fan fictions being published into novels, and I get a little bit of joy every time I see a anti Reylo read a book and then not realize until afterwards that it was a Reylo fic. I'm like, sweet victory a little bit. But yeah, I totally forgot.
I was just gonna say, why, if you're an anti-Reylo, why are you reading an enemies to lovers book?
Oh, right.
That's true.
Right.
That is so true. But I'm reading. I'm looking at our outline. I totally forgot 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fan fiction.
Yeah.
Totally forgot.
It's been so long too. I almost forgot for a second. Like I was really thinking about all the Reylo fanfics instead. And so when I saw that on the outline, I said, "Oh yeah, that was one of the classics." Fun random tangent on that. That 50 Shades being revealed as Twilight fanfiction is what eventually got Anne Rice to talk about how she kind of got over her hatred of fanfiction, because I was reading in this a now archived Metro UK article talking about at the time, because it was a huge deal that a fan fiction became a published work with 50 Shades of Grey, and they were trying to get the opinions of authors of how do you as the author feel that this book is now successful because it was fan fiction of your work. And they mentioned Anne Rice because she was so notorious for hating fan fiction to the point that, and I'm going to kick the hornet's nest here with her fans, that she encouraged her fans to harass people over it. But in somewhere around 2012, 2013, she came out saying that fan fiction is going to exist. I'm just not going to read it. And I'm like, you spent the 90s and the early 2000s harassing fans for writing Louis and Lestat fanfics. Like,
And
that's
look at where the fuck we are now.
yeah,
you
look
know?
at where exactly. This is where we are now. Like, this is why the olden days of fan fiction we had to write "We do not own the characters" because Anne Rice was suing fanfic writers. She
Yeah.
was going that far, only for her in 2012, 2013 to like finally lighten her stance on it. Surprisingly, and I remembered because it was from a 50 Shades of Grey article I was reading. So I'm like, hey, look, she's back. Then again, Anne Rice also began pivoting her harassment to bad reviewers. Like, if you reviewed her book badly, she started harassing you over that. So I think she got over fan fiction to do that instead. I'm like, you know what? You do you, I guess. Not great, but that's the pivot of how she harassed her fans is a fascinating read.
That's
Interesting.
that's very interesting because I feel like Interview with the Vampire is like it's so popular right now with the show, and I'm
Yeah.
certain there are so many fics out there.
My roleplay partner won't get back to me because she's too call out post. She's too into Interview with the Vampire right now. She keeps texting me and going, I haven't read your reply. I haven't read your reply. I'm still in the vampire phase. I'm like,
That that's so real though, is like when I'm too deep into something else, it's hard for me to like go back to that mindset of like, okay, now I have to go back to enjoying this thing. Like, full transparency, I love Star Wars. I will always love Star Wars. But like, I'm just having a hard time being excited for the new Star Wars stuff because I'm just like, my brain is in the like fantasy. I'm play way too much Baldur's Gate, D&D, like that whole subsection, like Critical Role, Vox Machina, all of that stuff. I'm just like, that's all my brain, little worm brain cares about right now. I'm sure it's obviously it'll change, because you've got your, I feel like you have hyper fixations, and then you've got your like long standing loves or special interests, as they say.
Right.
And sometimes it overlaps. Sometimes a hyperfixation becomes a special interest. But anywho,
Yeah.
this has been really fun.
It has been. Thank you again for allowing me to yap with you two about fan fiction.
yeah, thanks for coming on the show. Oh my gosh. What do you think, Brooke? Do you want to do some rapid fire real quick?
We can. I only came up with 2.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of any others that we can. Sometimes we'll try to end or do like a little rapid fire section of just rapid fire questions. But we don't always forget, but sometimes it's hard to come out because we try to like personalize them to like either the theme of the episode or the person. So we've got 2 here.
Sure.
Cool. We'll do 2, maybe a third rapid fire if we can think of one. Okay. Do you have a favorite ship of all time?
Yeah, right now it's I'm gonna butcher their names because they are Chinese characters. Lan Wanjing and Wei Wuxian from the series Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. I'm not sure how much of our audiences will coincide with that, but if you know, they are best couple. Wei Wuxian did nothing wrong, and his husband stays by his side his whole time. So OTP of all time.
Amazing. That gives me another one. Do you remember the first ship that you remember shipping?
Oh yeah, it had to have been either 2 characters from Digimon, and I can't think of them, like the first series of Digimon, and Yugi and Taya from Yu-Gi-Oh! Nice. I was huge into anime, so yeah, those 2.
Love. And then do you have like a top 3, if you could think of like your top 3 favorite fan fictions? You don't have to like say what they are, but like what franchise they're from or what characters are involved.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to shout out one. This one I don't think was ever posted on AO3, so I found it on LiveJournal. It's called Shine Like the Sun. It's Spock and Kirk. When I was really liking Star Trek, it's Spock gets amnesia, so this is based off the movies. So he forgets that he and Kirk at this point have been in a relationship, and it's back to the first movie where Kirk had just cheated on the Kobayashi Maru, so he really doesn't like Kirk, and it's all from Spock's amnesic perspective. So he does not understand why the entire crew is like, you two were together. Like, why do you hate him so much? And it hurt when he got his memory back and he realized all the horrible things he was saying to Kirk, and him trying to figure out if he can repair that relationship. It was for 3 years I had that fan fiction still saved on my phone, like as a tab. I would just have it open to reread it every once in a while. And a second one is from another Danmei fandom, the Scum Villain Self-Saving Villain. No, System. Scum Villain Self-Saving System. It's a long title. Called I Wish You Were My Husband. And it's just that fic got so popular. It has its own like fandom lore website because it was so close to the original canon, but like spun in a different way that people sometimes when my friends and I talk about that series, we're like, wait, was that from the original series or was that from the fan fiction?
That's when you know it's a good fic, though. I'll say one of my favorite fan fictions that I also have saved on my Kindle, which if you didn't know, people of the internet, if you have a Kindle and you have AO3, you can download fics from AO3 as a PDF and email them to your Kindle, and then you can read them offline. Greatest thing ever. I got a Kindle last year for Christmas, and I've read more fan fiction on it than I've read actual books. But I digress. One of my favorite fan fictions is there's 2 parts. There's one, and then there's like a sequel to it. It's a Daryl Dixon OC fic from The Walking Dead. But it's so close to canon. And it's like one of them is half of it is from like the OC's perspective, and then the other half is from Daryl's perspective. And the author is so good at writing his like voice, which Daryl is kind of hard to write sometimes because he is so like doesn't talk a lot. Like sometimes I'll read, this is a small tangent, sometimes I'll read like, and it's fine, you know, I just stop reading it, but I'll read like a Daryl fic and he's like way too talkative or way too like aggressive. Like if it's a smutty one, it's like that man is not a dom, sorry. But anyway, it's like it's such a huge fanfic. The first one is like 100 something chapters, and then the second one is like up to like 80 something, and it follows canon so close that I can like imagine the OC character like fitting so seamlessly into the actual canon of the show that I'll have to like remind myself, like when I rewatch it, I'm like, oh yeah, this character is not actually a part of the show, but I wish she was because she's great.
Oh, that's awesome.
But just a little shout out to that. But cool. This is great. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes.
And I feel like we can just yap forever. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But Hazel, thank you so much. This is great. If you could let our listeners know where they can find your content.
Yeah, I am DOS_Hazel on Instagram and YouTube. Trying to keep my YouTube monetization, made $17 in 5 years. Look at that.
Hell yeah.
And on TikTok, I am _DOS_Hazel_ because I took DOS Hazel when TikTok first came out, and I lost login.
Oh no!
And I could not get that name back.
No.
Yeah, that's where I am. And if you find me on AO3, that's your fault.
Love. It's you know what? It can be a challenge. I always say like if anyone can find my Tumblr, like good for you. But also I'm not sorry because you found it.
Right.
But yeah, okay, cool. So this was fun. We'll and everyone else listening, enjoy. I hope you liked the episode. We never know how to end things, and it's also been a few weeks since we've recorded, and we were getting better at closing an episode out. But now I'm just rambling. So anywho, we'll yap with y'all. Yeah. Thank you.
Don't forget to give this video a like, and we will see y'all in the next one.
Yep. We'll yap with y'all again soon.
Bye.
Bye.